everybody. I'm Regina Bryan, and welcome to the Women of Empowered Living. My guest today says she is living the dream. She is a licensed psychologist, a coach, a speaker, and now an author. She found the John Maxwell team and joined back in 2016 and then made her way right over here to Empowered Living, where she has served as one of our team ambassadors. I am so delighted to have on today my new friend, Myrelis Aponte. Hey, Myrelis, how are you today?
Hi guys, for me this is family, so I feel so excited to be here with you, Regina, and to spend some time.
Now, I love your backdrop, but tell us, where are you joining us from today?
I'm in West Palm Beach, Florida, but I'm originally Puerto Rican, so Latina flavor in me. You guys know me, you've seen me in the announcement, so this is all me.
Oh my gosh. Now, I said you were living the dream when I introduced you because we had such a sweet, fun chat. And one of the things I know about you, and I gather from that conversation, is just how big into family you are and your girls. And you've just created this wonderful life in Florida, and you have horses, which I'm going to come see. But talk to us a little bit about where you live and about the horses, because I just think you have a really cool kind of family thing happening. So talk to us about that.
Yes, I am. I have to say, I am living the dream, and it keeps on building, right? This is what we've been taught by our mentors and our coaches, and it is real. And honestly, when my husband and we got married in 2010, and we had our first girl in 2012, right? And so I think that that was a very important time for me because it really transformed who I had been up until then, right? Up until then, I had thought just of my career, just of, how my life, all my dreams were going to come true through my career. And then motherhood came and blew me away. I have
Oh,
to say, Regina, like motherhood completely started to work on me and change my perspectives, right? Change my whole perspective. So through our years of parenthood, one of the things that we rediscovered was our love for horses. And so my oldest daughter, we have two daughters, one is 9 years old and one is 6. But my oldest, when since she was a little girl, a year and a half, she had this thing for ponies. But what kid doesn't, right? Like what kid doesn't at 1.5? So I remember having this beautiful place in Puerto Rico that had pony rides, and we just would just take her over until she was the age of 4. We had a friend who knew her love for horses and said, "Hey, why don't you bring her to a riding lesson? Why don't we go in Puerto Rico? There's this beautiful breed called Paso Finos horses, and there's a whole it's a whole culture because it's part of our big culture in Puerto Rico." And I said, I hadn't thought of that. Why not? Well, our whole world changed because from the first day my daughter was on that horse, we all said, "Oh my Lord, this is her, this is her purpose." And it has been ever since. So our whole family has grown together through our love for the horses. Now, my husband and I already loved horses though. But it just came to life in this stage of our lives when we found something that my daughter was passionate about and we were both in love with. So we have just made it a part of our family dream, and it's something that we continue to build and something that we continue to grow as the girls grow and as we grow as a family.
that's so cool. And I have an opposite horse story than you and your
I
girl.
remember.
I screamed. I was on a horse one time on the beach at Amelia Island there in beautiful Florida, not too far from Jacksonville. I was with this group of friends, and we were going to take this beautiful horseback riding adventure on the beach, and I screamed the whole way out on the beach. I was the last one. I had this little frail horse. They put me on the sweetest, gentlest horse, and I screamed the whole time. And it was only the last 5 minutes that I thought, gosh, this might have been kind of cool. So you're the
Could
first
be, it
person.
could have been if you relaxed, but I'm glad you were on a horse that was understanding your
Oh my
feelings.
God, it was the best horse ever for someone like me. And when I told you that story, and we're talking about your girls, and I had always wished that I got on a horse again. I
Mhm.
thought, why have I never done that again? Because I did think it was great at the last moment. And so I'm going to come my next trip to Florida. I'm going
We
to
have
visit
a
you.
plan, and it's interesting what you just said. I'm always thinking of learning things, and you just said you would have wished you got on a horse again. And that's exactly what we do when we are on a horse and you fall. You have to get back on it like right then and there. And it's so important because you build on the experience and you don't let yourself be overcome with the fear. So the one thing that we're all taught, in the equestrian world is you fall off the horse, you get back on, and you go forward. Now you don't necessarily have to go running forward, but you go forward,
That's
and
a great
that's going
metaphor
to
for
help you
life.
overcome fear. And so it just makes a lot of sense that you want to get back on a horse, and I'll get you on a horse, I promise.
You're the only person that I trust to do that. So on the next trip to Florida, and we're going to plan something out, I'm going to at least sit on the horse.
Oh no, you'll do more than that, I promise. Listen, if my 80-year-old mother
Oh my
got
gosh.
our horse and she fulfilled that dream, I can bet you're gonna do it and enjoy it.
Okay, well, you all have heard that here first. I've got to go to Florida, not just get on the horse. I've got to ride the horse, and Myrelis is my accountability partner in this.
I will be your accountability partner on it.
You've done so many cool things, and we're going to talk about the horses a little bit again, I hope. But one of the things you told me is that you worked for FEMA, one of our government agencies. And I just think, wow. So what did you do when you worked with FEMA?
I was 22, 23 years old, Regina. And I remember I told you this story because that's how my training and development field kind of started in my life. I had graduated from my bachelor's. At that time, I used to serve the deaf community as an interpreter, sign language interpreter. And so they were looking, a hurricane had just passed through the island and they were looking for interpreters. I had heard it on the news or something. And somebody said, listen, go drop that resume on a box there, where they're receiving, and let's see, So I did that, as a young person, looking for an opportunity. And because I had an experience at Penn State University during college years, I remember I got this call and said, hey, we're from FEMA, we're from the training and development department. And I'm like going, what does that have to do with sign language interpreting? And they say, listen, you were on, I see that you were on Penn State for a traineeship. I see that you like, cooperative learning. We're looking for somebody for the training and development department. Would you be interested? And of course, what did Myrelis say? D personality? Yes, right?
Of course.
So I say yes. I go for a second interview, face-to-face interview. They immediately take me and say, okay, wonderful, go fill out the paperwork and tomorrow you start. They gave me these binders because at that time it was binder, with the transparency.
Right.
So they gave me this huge binder, like 2-inch binder, and say, okay, this is what you will be teaching tomorrow, like 3 different sessions. Boom, they give me this binder, and there we go, government ethics, and I don't know what else I had to teach from one day to the other and sound like an expert. So those were my first, like my first true experiences as a trainer. And I have to say, I would have never planned on being a trainer, I think, if it would have not been for that moment and that opportunity of me
I
saying,
love
oh
that.
yes,
Yeah.
and I had the most beautiful thing is that I still had mentors at that time. Now that I look back at it, there were 2 older men that used to do this for many years, and they took me by the hand during those times, and we did this during emergencies. So you can imagine it's all about the stress and the moment. And I remember having to train 300 employees at the same time from one day to the other because we just had to get people signed up and going to help people that were in distress. So it was one of the most amazing experiences I've had is
I
working.
love that because you said that you would have never gone in that direction had it not been for them seeing your resume and saying, "Hey, would you like to come on as a trainer?" And you trained what, ethics and what else? What were
Oh
your
my
top?
goodness. No, no, I trained everything. I remember at that time, is that I remember the stories now and I go, what, you do with age, you're so willing and we have to do that at any age in our life. I
That's right.
remember they would put the binders of like PowerPoint. We were teaching people even how to use the computers just to be able to work and
Wow.
do all this data entry. So I'm teaching Excel, Word, PowerPoint, teamwork, delegation skills, and all of
Pretty
a sudden,
much whatever they threw in front of you.
whatever they threw in front of me, I had to learn to look like I knew what I was doing, right? To sound proper, and for people to trust that I was teaching them the right thing. As I was learning. And I love because Paul always says, when he teaches you about the masterminds, he always says, the only thing you got to be is 1 week ahead of them.
That's
So
it.
don't worry about it, right? And that's exactly what I used to do. They would give me a binder. I would just take that binder, study it like crazy. Thank God I always liked studying. I would study it like crazy the night before. And then the next day I was ready for 3 or 4 or 5 sessions of whatever
Oh
it was
my
that I
gosh.
had to teach.
That's so awesome. And how long were you at FEMA?
I was there for about 3 to 4 years. I did a number of disasters, both in Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, New York, New Jersey. So that gave me an opportunity of meeting so many wonderful people, people that we still connect and we still, made great relationships with. But more than anything, the opportunity of learning on the go. It was really a work that you were always creating, always, having to not change the goal, but change the strategy kind of thing, where you always had, oh my goodness, how are we going to make this happen under these conditions? Because wherever you went, it was a disaster. So you had to figure things out in the moment and make it work.
Wow. And you had your master's at that time. So was it
During that
after
time, I was
FEMA?
doing my master's. Yes, long
No.
distance. Oh, believe me, I had my books. I had the little bit of internet that we used at that time. So it was interesting, but I still had some long distance courses while I was doing this. So oh yeah, it was
That-
interesting.
I mean, that was a lot going on. So at what point did you think, now I'll go get my PhD?
Well, actually, that was one of the reasons why I ended FEMA, because I had to be, for my PhD, I had to be in a longer term in one place. I had finished my master's. I was given the opportunity to work at Gallaudet University, which is a specialized university for the deaf in Washington, D.C. And I wanted the experience, of course. So I went and did that, but I always wanted more. I was taught, career, right? So if it was your master's, now you go for your PhD, and that's how it went. That's what I had learned until I learned better. But so as I was working on Washington D.C. At Gallaudet University, of course, this eagerness of finishing my PhD and doing more and wanting more. At that time, I was a mental health counselor. So I wanted more. I wanted to understand more. And the way to do that was going to do my PhD. So I did it in neuropsychology. And so I specialized in a way that I could understand the brain better. That was like my goal. I had all these theories about therapy, but it didn't connect that much with the brain yet. So I went for my PhD at that time, and that's why really they still kept on calling me though, but I took some time to do my degree.
Yeah, so you just had this love of learning more about the brain. And that's why when the brain revolution came to the empowered living community, you were like a super fan. This was
Oh
like a
yeah,
dream come true for you.
oh yeah.
So, in regards to the work that you do, why were you just such a fan of this brain revolution program when it was developed?
I think it started with understanding myself. The way that, since I started training and I started introducing, the brain pieces as I was learning neuropsychology, I always ended up teaching people about brain health. And I didn't know exactly why. I cannot tell you, I had Dr. Amen in my head or anything like that. I just knew that every time I had a workshop, you can see one presentation after the other. I felt a need to teach people about brain health because that made it more logical for them to understand why now we're thinking the way we're thinking, now why you're behaving the way you're behaving. And so it made a much better sense. Even in my clinical work, I can tell you there was not one patient or one client that would come through my door, and not sit with me and I wouldn't go through brain health. So when the brain revolution came for me, it was like a connection, it makes sense. And I felt like I had found a partner in that sense, because I felt alone all these years talking about brain health. Everybody's talking about mental illness, which I'm, really opposed to, in the sense that why don't we prevent mental illness? Why don't, with the information that we have, we worked on preventing people from getting into the lowest moment of their lives, right? Or if they are on that way, on that pathway, that we can help them, not get so deep, and help them restructure, transform their lives. So
Yeah.
for me, that was my talk all the time. When Green Revolution came, for me, that was like, finally, I found somebody that talks like I do.
Now, who are most of your patients? Who do you mostly serve and work with?
Well, I have served anywhere from, kitties, babies, all the way to my big babies, which the elderly. But at this point in my life, my current clients are two groups. One is still the children, because I work a lot with parents. There's a lot of parents that still need, and that's why I love the Brain Strive part of the program, because it talks about brain development. And so I still serve a lot of the school communities. I teach and I train teachers in neural learning and neural skills. And then there is the people that are, self-growth, right? So I will do some of the wellness programs for corporations as well as individual clients. And honestly, the most amazing have been, people that you don't think that will come to the coaching but are really needing it, such as doctors and people who already have a lot of knowledge, but their personal life has needed way more transformation because they have found those empty spaces. And I had them, I knew I had a lot of career, but I had a lot of personal development to do in my life. Now I had to discover it, of course. Most
Right.
people, in the science field, I know I can share, we're so data driven and documented, and it's so hard to go deep inside, right? I remember having a professor during my doctoral degree, and when he was teaching us clinical skills, he said, listen, you got to remember, it is easier for a person to take their clothes off in front of a doctor, right? When they're told that they have to undress because they had to be checked up, than to undress their emotions and to undress their thoughts. And so it is even harder to do that than to just, physically be allowed yourself to see your intimacy more than your intimate thoughts and feelings. And so he was very concerned that we knew this was hard to do. People would rather take their clothes off, than allow themselves to feel and understand that there is some processing to do there. There's
It's
some
really
healing.
amazing that we're still having that trouble in the world of mental health, making it okay to not be okay and
Yeah.
putting mental health mainstream. I had a guest, Mary Britton, on recently, and she is a nurse in this field. And we were saying the same thing, how, her mother committed suicide years ago in the early 70s. And she said, there hasn't been a lot of movement as far as our society's thinking towards mental health. I guess are you of that same opinion and perspective for how long you've been in this field, and why do you suppose mental health is still sort of shunned?
I think it's big negative stigmas with it, because we take it outside of the brain. We take it outside of an organ. We're all
Good.
thinking of thoughts and feelings as if it's not related to any organ in our body, when it is totally impacted by the main and principal organ in our body, which is our brain. So when we connect, when we're able to connect, and I think that's why, I've been promoting my book, and I know we'll talk about it later, but
Yeah.
one of the things that has been so good for it is that people have been like, what are you talking about brain health? I mean, like, like, it's been like, tell me more about that, right?
Right.
Because there's people are not talking about this. They're only talking about prevent suicide, prevent anxiety, prevent, but their prevention is really look at the symptoms so you can take the person to help. They're not really talking about true prevention, which would mean brain health, understanding how to take care of your brain.
You are so right about that, because I think when Dr. Amen said, what if mental health was really brain health? I sort of almost fell out of my chair, because you just hit the nail on the head. If we can connect that to something in our physical body, like our brain,
Mhm.
people will be more open to receiving that.
Totally. And you will see, I remember I used my internship was with patients with epilepsy at the NYU Medical Center, right, in New York. And we had all sorts of conditions show up, right? All sorts of symptoms. And we had to really decide, was this really epilepsy or was this a psychological
Mm.
response? And people would always rather find that it was something that was a problem in the brain than it was something psychological, right? So why? Because of the stigmas, right? And so it didn't matter. People insisted on, no, this is not psychological. This is, it's got to be neurological. Now, of course, because psychiatrists and so many sciences are not using the imaging that Dr. Amen uses, it was very hard at times to say, well, this is psychological, yeah, but it's still driven by the brain. If we would have had those kind of imaging, not just the electro
Right.
images, right? The EEGs, the electrographs, it would have been way different, because people would have been finding how the brain is functioning different for each and everything, even when it is an emotional piece, even when it is a thought-driven piece. And so that's really a brain revolution.
It really, really is.
It is, because we know so much about the brain for many, many decades. Unfortunately, when it comes to emotions and thought, we're still just looking at an external piece of us and not an internal piece of us.
That is so true. So I think if we can get the word out, people like yourself and then others like me that were so fascinated to go through the certification, and
Mm,
just let people know that mental health is brain health.
it's
That
brain health.
it's a
Mm,
game changer.
it is.
So let's talk about your book. I know how proud you are of homeostasis, and
Homeostasis.
I
Yeah,
have not
I
read it
have done
yet. I cannot wait. Talk to us about what drove you to write the book. What was the catalyst? What was going on for you?
Listen, I had been going through, these years of transformation, always wanting to grow, to learn, to move forward, right?
Right.
And I cannot tell you how many book outlines I have written in through my journals or through my, I can go back years and years and see how many different books I have written in my head, right? But they had never been put on paper. They had never been really, it had never concretized on anything physical. And so it was on 2019. I remember it was the summer of 2019. My pastor puts me on the stage, right? To share the stage with this amazing Puerto Rican woman too, so Latin flavor there. uh, Dr. Lourdes Allen. And I have to give the credit to her because she was willing. She's a woman in her 60s who has been a speaker, an author. She has her PhD and has written 7 books, right?
Wow.
And so as we're getting to know each other, like you and I, we had that kind of conversation of getting to know each other. She says, this is wonderful, Dr. Myrelis. I love everything that you've told me. Now, you got your doctorate, so when is your first book coming out? You know, and it's like,
She put you right on the
I'd
spot.
love to. I need a mentor. So the first thing I go and say, well, I need a mentor. And she says, well, you found one. If you're serious about this, we're going to do this. And I said, I am serious. God doesn't put a mentor like that in front of you for nothing, right?
Right.
So I immediately took her word for it. And in 2 weeks later, we were having our first meeting. And she certainly did her job from A to Z in terms of, you know, giving me the accountability, giving me the guidance, giving me her experience, sharing what worked for her, what didn't work for her. Now she's a mathematician, so you can imagine, you know, I'm a DI. And she's a D, but C, you know,
Right.
she's a
Lots of sleep.
I could see. So she really kept me so organized because my distracted brain could go all over the place, and she just kept me focused, kept me through it, and pushed all the way till the end. So we were able to make this happen, even through the pandemic, because we really had to work some parts of this through the pandemic. And she still, you know, even when anybody, you know, we didn't know where this was going, we said, this is started. It was, you know, pretty much almost done by before the pandemic. So we said, this is not staying, you know, in the scratches. We got to finish this. So we pushed through, and we made this dream come true. And so I always have to give her the credit of being an amazing mentor, but also somebody who saw the potential in me, right? Because I could have just met her that day and that would have been it. And we shared the stage and that was it. But she was there wanting to leave a legacy of her work, and she passed that on to me, and I cannot be more grateful.
Oh, and I know that you want to leave a legacy and in the work that you're doing. And I think we also talked, are you going to be starting something with children, with the horses? And should I sign up to be in the children's group?
You are more than invited. But yeah, well, our dear Paul, you know, both I'm in the results mastermind with Paul.
Yep.
And then now actually as we're recording this, Paul is gonna be with us also in the high achievers mastermind that is in Spanish. So my husband is joining me for that one. And because we have this dream for us as a family, we
Right.
understood that, you know, it wasn't only me, the one who had to have those dreams. Now we dream as a family and we have our vision boards, and everybody that comes to my house can see those vision boards all over the place. But we needed more than that, right? We needed structure. And so Paul said, okay, let's get that business going. So now I'm a therapeutic riding instructor. I'm a certified therapeutic riding
That's
instructor.
why you're the perfect person for me, Myrelis.
And and I did that to serve at church. Honestly, as I originally saw it, you know, we went I went through that process of getting certified, which was 2 years of incredible work,
2 years.
physical, and, you know, in learning.
Wow.
And we said, you know, the future of my daughter, I can see it already, is with the horses, right? And so we said we might as well find ways to serve as a family. So we found ways of doing it through therapeutic riding. So we do that. That's part of our tithing of our time and of our expertise. And so we do it for the Christ Fellowship Church for the special needs program. And we've been doing that for 3 years. Now we're going to our 4th year, and now I lead. You know, I came in as a volunteer who would just sidewalk next to the horses. We just wanted to be with the horses and the kids, right? But now God has put both things together. My experience with, you know, the diverse functionality population, our expertise in horses, my expertise in psychology. So I think he's putting all of those together. And so Paul said, we gotta put that to work. So we're gonna do some youth camps to build leadership skills, but we also do therapeutic riding for diverse functionality, and diverse functionality fits all of us, right?
That is so awesome. When do the youth camps for the children start? When?
Well, those are going to happen on Saturdays. And up to now, the first one is going to be August 20 something after the 21st. So I think it's the 28th.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool, Myrelis. You've got so many wonderful things happening, and we're just honored to have you as part of the show and as part of this community here. You really give a lot. I want to ask you the final question. You know it was coming. You've
I
talked a
know.
great deal about health, brain health, just your whole life, and the legacy you want to leave also with your girls. What does an empowered life mean to you?
I think through, and every time you think about it, I think different words come out of my mouth, but really it's living a life of purpose. I have found that, without having understood my purpose, it was very hard to find the way. And so living an empowered life has meant everything I do has a beautiful purpose in my life. And it's taken me and my children, my daughters and my husband and myself. I mean, it's our nucleus. That's the family that God has given me. And so it's taking us to serve and to be better people every day. That will complete our dreams, our goals, and everything else that I want in life. But without that purpose, I have found that it's really empty. So living an empowered life is understanding your purpose, understanding it and living it fully, live your dream.
Oh, and we can see that you're living yours. You are living the dream. You are such a beautiful soul, Myrelis. I am so glad you and I finally got to connect.
Oh, I'm
Thank you.
excited to get
Thank
you on
you.
my horse.
I'm coming. Thank you for being a part of the show. We really appreciate that.
God bless you. And, this is my family. This is part of the family that we built. And so thank you for having me here.
And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.